The Information Age.
Table of Contents, The Information Age.
All about the Information Age. Also called the Second Industrial Revolution or the Digital Age. This is the age when the sensing and control power of computers and other electronic devices greatly enhance that of humans. This is just as in the First Industrial Revolution. The mechanical power of steam engines and land and other engines and machines amplify the power of humans and animals.
Dr. Sydney Soclof. Dr. Sydney22@gmail.com. 2023. Narration by Dr. Sydney Soclof.
Zoe Phonemes.
And Nathan Koltov. For a complete discussion of YouTube navigation, please go to tiny.1/ytnavigator.
The Information Age.
The Information Age is the continuation of the Industrial Revolution. Just as mechanical power replaced muscle power at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, so now computer power is replacing much of brain power in the Information Age. Complex and tedious record-keeping, analysis, and control of machinery is being turned over to computers.
Introduction. The Information Age. Telegraphy, telephone and radio, computers and industrial automation, the Internet, fiber optics, communication satellites, genetic engineering and bioengineering, present and future trends, globalization, the digital world, the future. The idea is linked to the concept of a digital age or digital revolution, and carries the ramifications of a shift from traditional industry that the Industrial Revolution brought through industrialization to an economy based on the manipulation of information.
The Information Age formed by capitalizing on the computer micro-miniaturization advances, with a transition spanning from the advent of the personal computer in the late 1970s to the Internet reaching a critical mass in the early 1990s, and the adoption of such technology by the public in the 2 decades after 1990.
The Information Age has allowed rapid global communications and networking to shape modern society.
The Second Industrial Revolution. Those are interesting questions, Timmy. I suggest you ask your search engine. It was easier when you went to school, Dad. That was before the Information Age. A short video on the Information Age is #1 on the Information Age playlist.
A short video on the 5 interesting facts about the Information Age is #2 on the Information Age playlist.
A short video on the evolution of Information Age is #3 on the Information Age playlist.
A short video on Claude Shannon, father of the Information Age is #4 on the Information Age playlist.
A short video on the genius of George Boole, HT1, is #5 on the Information Age playlist.
What is information? The most basic form of information is binary. That is, 2 distinct states, like on or off, yes or no, or up or down in past times. This information was conveyed over distances by the presence or absence of a puff of smoke, the presence or absence of light from a fire, a hand signal, or some sound from a drum or horn. Information in binary rather than analog form has proven to be the fastest, most robust, error-free, and efficient way to transmit information. With the electrical age, it was the dots and dashes of the telegraph, the electrical pulses on an electric wire or radio wave, and most recently, the pulses of light on a fiber optic cable.
George Boole, 1815 to 1864, was a mathematician whose Boolean algebra formed the basis of the computer logic that is the foundation for computer science.
The pioneering work in binary algebra and computer logic was done by George Boole, 1815 to 1864. In 1854, British mathematician George Boole published a landmark paper detailing an algebraic system of logic that would become known as Boolean algebra. His logical calculus was to become instrumental in the design of digital electronic circuitry. This was followed by the theory of information by Claude Shannon, 1916 to 2001. In 1937, Claude Shannon produced his master's thesis at MIT that implemented Boolean algebra and binary arithmetic using electronic relays and switches for the first time in history. Entitled A Symbolic Analysis of Relay and Switching Circuits, Shannon's thesis essentially founded practical digital circuit design.
You've probably heard a lot about analog and digital, but maybe haven't understood what they are all about.
Let us now learn a little about analog and digital, and help solve the mystery of all this. We will next have a short video clip of analog versus digital.
Analog and digital are two different ways of describing quantity. If you ask a fisherman how many fish he has caught, and he holds up 8 digits like this, he is describing the quantity of fish in a digital way. He's using separate individual digits to describe separate individual objects, which is fine, because this is a very clear-cut situation. You either catch 8 fish or you don't. You can't catch a little less or a little more than 8 fish. But if you ask the fisherman how big the fish was that got away, and he holds his hands up like this, he is describing the quantity of missing fish in an analog way. The distance between his hands is an analogy for the length of the fish. And this analog way of describing quantity is much more convenient than the digital way, when you have to describe something that can vary continuously, given the elastic nature of the average fisherman's memory. In the world of machines, one of the commonest analog devices is a dimmer. The turning of the knob corresponds to the fading up or down of the light. It is a continuously variable device. The light can be more or less on. Contrast this with a light switch, which is the simplest digital device of all. The light is either on or off. Which brings us to that collection of on-off switches which is called a computer. Obviously itself a digital device, since it has to deal with everything in terms of binary digits. The computer's keyboard is also digital. There are lots of separate individual keys, and you either press one or you don't. But this can be awkward when you have to describe something which varies continuously, such as the movement of a little rocket ship on the screen, because you have to fragment this movement into separate units. Forward 30, right 90, forward 30, and so on. So here is where it's much better to use the analog way of representing continuous movement by means of game paddles, which relate directly to what is happening on the screen. The more you turn the paddle, the more the rocket ship turns. But there's room for both ways, of course, both analog and digital. If you want to represent reality in a smooth, continuous fashion, go analog. If you want to represent reality one little piece at a time, go digital.
We will next have a short video clip about physics waves and analog and digital signals.
Analog and digital signals. There are two different ways of sending information, either by analog or by digital signals. So what's the difference? Well, let's look at the analog signal on screen. We can see that it varies continuously in both amplitude and frequency, and the signal can take one of many different values. Now let's look at a digital signal. So here we see that the signal can only take two values, either a 1 or a 0, which we sometimes call on or off. Digital signals are sent as a series of pulses of either 1s or 0s. Okay, so that's great, but which is better? Well, digital is a much better way of sending information over long distances. Now let's see why. So, here is someone talking on a phone. The signal from their voice is analog, sound, and it enters the phone and is converted to a digital signal, and then sent out via microwaves to a phone mast, which then sends it on to a satellite, and then back down to another phone mast, and then on to the person receiving the phone call. Let's look at the signal received by that phone. If we look, we can see it has picked up a lot of noise or interference, but it's still really obvious exactly what it should look like, so the phone can easily convert it back perfectly to be the same as the original signal. Now let's look at this using analog. So now the analog signal, the sound, enters the phone and is turned into an analog electrical signal and sent down copper wires. Now, note how it picks up noise and interference, and the amplitude is reduced as it travels until it gets to the other phone. Now let's look at it again. It looks very, very different to the original signal now. It's almost completely impossible to know what this signal should have looked like. And it needs amplifying as well. This amplification is only going to amplify the noise just as much as it does the signal. So noise or interference has really damaged the analog signal. And this is why digital is so much better than analog. Noise or interference is just not a problem for digital, but is a huge one for analog, making digital signals much higher quality. Other benefits of digital are that it can carry much more information. In fact, you can send multiple different signals all at the same time, and digital signals are also easily interpreted by computers.
We will next have a short video clip about computer science basics. Binary.
Throughout history, almost every civilization has used a decimal number system with 10 digits, 0 through 9. All of the numbers we can possibly think of use some combination of those 10 digits. Computers, however, operate very differently. Instead, they use a number system that has just 2 digits, 1 and 0. This system is called binary, and your computer uses it all the time. Computers need information in order to do what they do. This digital information, or data, is made up of something called bits. Bit is short for binary digit, meaning each bit is really just a single number, either a 1 or a 0. These bits can be combined to create larger units like bytes, megabytes, and so on that we use to measure our files. The larger a file is, the more bits it has. So something like a high-resolution video is actually made up of millions and millions and millions of ones and zeros. So how exactly do these ones and zeros come together and allow a computer to function? Let's think of binary as a light switch. Imagine that a 1 represents the light switch being on, and 0 represents it being off. With binary, the light is either on or off with no other possible states. So these bits are strung together as different combinations of 1s and 0s, and they form a kind of code. Your computer then rapidly processes this code and translates it into data, telling it what to do. You might be wondering, why do computers use binary instead of the decimal system that we use for counting things in the real world? Well, as previously mentioned, binary has 2 states, off and on. If computers were to use decimal, there would be 10 states instead. Our computers would have to work a lot harder to process all of these. Binary is easier for them to process and also takes up less space. Just like atoms make up everything around us in the real world, everything in the digital world, including video, text, pictures, and more, can be broken down into binary. And even though we can't see them, it's all a bunch of 1s and 0s.
GCF Global, creating opportunities for a better life.
We will next have a video about why do computers use ones and zeros.
It's a common theme throughout the modern world that everything in a computer's brain comes down to ones and zeros. You've most likely heard that this code of ones and zeros is what's referred to as binary. And while almost everybody knows that this is somehow related to what computers do, very few of us seem to understand what binary is or why computers use it. If you want to know, then this video is for you, because it's actually a very simple concept and still quite fascinating. Before we get to computers, let's talk about what binary itself is, as it existed long before computers did. Binary is nothing more than a system of counting. To understand how it works, let's look at two other systems of counting, tally marks and the glorious base 10 positional that we all know and love today. Tally marks are the simplest counting system imaginable. However many things you have, you put down that many marks, easy as pie, but not very efficient. Meanwhile, base 10 positional, which is what we use today, uses a different symbol to represent different amounts of things. With the numbers 0 through 9, we can recognize that each symbol indicates a different amount of things. If we need to represent something higher than 9, we add a digit to the left, roll its first digit back to 0, and start over. This system is very efficient compared to tally marks because each digit we add exponentially increases the amount of things we can represent. Because in this system we add a new digit every 10 things, each digit represents an increasing power of 10. This is the number of ones we have, the number of tens, the number of hundreds, the number of thousands, and so on. Now this is probably something you already know, but it's very important to keep it in mind when we talk about binary. Now binary works the exact same way as base 10 positional, but instead of each digit going from 0 to 9, it goes from 0 to 1. Counting upwards in binary sounds like this: 0, 1, 10, 11, 100, 101, 110, 111, and 1000. Because each digit of binary has only 2 values and not 10, each additional digit represents an increasing power of 2 rather than an increasing power of 10. So this is the number of ones we have, the number of 2s, 4s, 8s, 16s, 32s, 64s, 128s, and so on. Not nearly as efficient as base 10, but exponentially more efficient than tally marks. Literally. So now that we know how binary works, let's talk about computers. Why did the first computer creators, as wise and intelligent as they are, waste their time with such an ineffective system of counting? Well, it's because of a physical limitation on how computers work. Everything a computer does comes down to what's known as microtransistors. Simple, tiny, eensy-beensy little switches that can either be on or off and can be flipped on or off with a very weak electrical charge. The first goal was to get computers to count. And to get them to count by using these switches, we could use the tally system, meaning the number of on switches equals the number of things we have, or we could use the much more efficient system of binary, where each switch represents a digit of binary. 8 transistors using the tally system could represent a number as large as 8 by turning all of them on. With binary, we can represent a number as high as 255. An on switch means a 1, and an off switch means a 0. Now is a good time to mention that a single transistor is what's known as a bit, which stands for binary digit. A byte is 8 of these bits in a row, which means any number between 0 and 255. So if binary is just a system of counting, what do people mean when they explain how to spell things in binary? Well, what they really mean is how to spell things with ASCII. The American Standard Code for Information Interchange is a way to convert a computer's data, which can only be in numbers, and turn it into letters for humans to have an easier time to work with. ASCII simply assigns a character to each value represented by a byte of binary. Now because a byte has 8 digits of binary to work with, and 8 digits of binary can represent up to 255 values, ASCII had 255 letters and symbols to choose from. More than enough for the entire alphabet, punctuation marks, and other symbols. For example, the corresponding ASCII number for an uppercase A is 65. Now 65 in base 10 is equal to 1,000,001 in binary. So whenever you type in an uppercase A in a word program, a coding program, or a scripting program or whatever, somewhere there's a little tiny row of 8 transistors arranged in the pattern of off, on, off, 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 on, which represents 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1 in binary, which is interpreted as 65 in base 10, which is converted by ASCII into an uppercase A. You're likely starting to get a feel for the staggering amount of transistors required to write something as simple as a Facebook status, let alone all the different coding that your computer has to do to make the screen light up, play games, calculate massive values, and so on. Well, long before we got to the point where your phone can play three-dimensional games, it became clear that numbers as high as 255 just weren't going to cut it. Regardless of how many bytes we had, and it was a lot, even adding 4 fully active bytes together could only get a number as high as 1020. To solve this problem, new computers were designed to recognize 2 bytes as one single number. So now, instead of referencing one line of 8 transistors, computers could reference 2 lines, giving 16 digits worth of binary. This was a huge help because it increased the amount of representable numbers exponentially from 255 up to 65,535. When you hear people talking about the difference between 8-bit and 16-bit, this is more or less it. Now, that doesn't mean that a 16-bit system is exponentially that much more powerful, because your program isn't always going to be utilizing all of these numbers in each byte that it represents. It just has the option to, which opens up lots of doors. Well, this could go on for ages and ages, but I want to end this particular video right here so as not to be overwhelming. In future videos, I will explain how computers use these numbers to decide which pixel is what color on your monitor, what the different components of your computer are for, and how hard drives store binary digits on a spinning disk rather than in transistors. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, liking and subscribing is always a huge help. While I've been enjoying making these instructional videos, I might move them to a different channel soon and continue doing comedic gaming related things on this channel so as not to confuse YouTube's search algorithm, which I think I am.
At the beginning of electrical communication and information transfer, there was telegraphy, telephone, and radio.
Various optical signaling systems had been in use since antiquity. But the modern electrical single-way telegraph system was first demonstrated by Samuel F. B. Morse in 1844. By 1862, a transcontinental system across the U.S. from the East Coast to California was in place.
This is Alexander Graham Bell on the telephone in New York calling Chicago in 1892. Radio became popular and widespread in the 1930s. Computer and industrial automation.
Computers have had a profound influence on almost every aspect of our lives.
The Boeing 777 was the first commercial aircraft designed entirely on computer. This allowed a virtual aircraft to be assembled in simulation to check for interferences and verify the proper fit of the many thousands of parts, thus reducing costly rework.
Industrial automation and robotics have changed the way almost everything is manufactured.
Product codes and scanners have revolutionized product distribution, shipping, inventory, and retail sales.
The Internet was conceived as a fail-proof network that could connect computers together and be resistant to any one point of failure. The Internet cannot be totally destroyed in one event. And if large areas are disabled, the information is easily rerouted. The Internet was created mainly by DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Its initial software applications were email and computer file transfer.
Though the Internet itself has existed since 1969, it was with the invention of the World Wide Web in 1989 by British scientist Tim Berners-Lee and its implementation in 1991 that the Internet truly became a global network.
Today, The Internet has become the ultimate platform for accelerating the flow of information and is, today, the fastest growing form of media, and is pushing many, if not most, other forms of media into obsolescence.
The proliferation of smaller and less expensive personal computers and improvements in computing power by the early 1980s resulted in a sudden access and ability to share and store information for more and more workers.
Connectivity between computers within companies led to the ability of workers at various levels to access greater amounts of information. Eventually, computers, computerized machinery, fiber optics, communication satellites, the Internet, and other tools became a significant part of the economy. Microcomputers were developed, and this considerably changed many businesses and industries.
Fiber optics has become the essential high-speed link for the transfer of information.
Communication satellites have become important for worldwide communication, data transfer,
and location via the Global Positioning Satellite System, GPSS.
Cell phones allow for instant communication from anywhere to anywhere. The enhancement of cell phones with smartphone technology has provided the information processing capabilities of desktop and laptop computers.
The small size and compactness tool of MP3 players allow for the enjoyment of hours of music and audiobooks while sitting down or on the go.
With cable TV and satellite TV, we now have a multitude of channels to choose from, including entertainment, documentaries, sports, music, news, commentary, travel, and almost anything else imaginable. Satellite TV allows for worldwide communication and entertainment.
Genetic engineering, or genetic modification, is the direct human manipulation of an organism's genome using modern DNA technology. It involves the introduction of foreign DNA or synthetic genes into the organism of interest.
The introduction of new DNA does not require the use of classical genetic methods. However, traditional breeding methods are typically used for the propagation of recombinant organisms.
Some cartoons about genetic engineering.
Isn't genetic engineering amazing? 2 years ago, who would have even imagined such a thing as a turkipede?
Now look, hey young lady. It cost us a fortune to give you a set of musical genes. So get on and play the bloody thing.
Cloning is all very well in theory. But do you have any proof it can actually work?
And we also thank the FDA for this genetically engineered food. Genetic Engineering Incorporated. We will make you an equal employer.
This has taken years of genetic research.
Present and future trends. Economies of scale. Mass markets. Transportation and communication. And globalization. Economies of scale in production. Transportation. Distribution. And retailing. Assembly lines represent economies of scale, specialization, and more recently, automation in production.
Transportation has evolved from horse and wagon to truck and trailer. And from sailing ships to the huge container ships. Distribution has evolved into a large-scale computer-controlled and automated system.
Retailing is changing into very large supercenters with computerized inventory and sales control.
And massive online retailers such as Amazon.
Globalization, is it good or bad?
This is a cartoon about globalization.
The pluses of globalization. Productivity grows faster when countries produce goods and services with a comparative advantage. Living standards can go up faster. Global competition and cheap imports keep a lid on prices. So inflation is less likely to derail economic growth. An open economy spurs innovation with fresh ideas from abroad. Export jobs often pay more than Fed jobs. Unfettered capital flows give the U.S. access to foreign investment and keep interest rates low. The minuses of globalization. Millions of Americans have lost jobs due to imports or production shifts abroad. Most find new jobs that pay less. Millions of others fear losing their jobs, especially at those companies operating under competitive pressure. Workers face pay cut demands from employers, which often threaten to export jobs. Service and white-collar jobs are increasingly vulnerable to operations moving offshore. U.S. employees can lose their comparative advantage when companies build advanced factories in low-wage countries, making them as productive as those at home. We will next have a short video clip about globalization.
The concept of globalization and the potential benefits aren't hard to understand. By eliminating trade barriers in an honest manner, everyone could theoretically win. 1. Poor countries would receive a significant influx of capital, as international companies take advantage of the lower wages, and in time, this could even lead to a gradual eradication of poverty. 2. Those who live in rich countries can take advantage of greater product variety, as well as better prices thanks to imports. 3. The world would move towards a more efficient allocation of capital, based on whatever it is each country can produce better than others. If a country cannot produce, let's say, clothing in a cost-effective manner, it can simply import clothes and focus on the products it's better at making. Unfortunately, things haven't exactly gone as planned for several reasons. 1. Most countries don't practice what they preach when it comes to being fair. For example, rich countries which encourage poorer countries to sell them resources, but discourage them from selling actual high value added products. 2. Everyone wants to game the system by artificially weakening their currency to boost exports, subsidizing industries, and so on. 3. Whenever something's wrong with the economy, local politicians and citizens love blaming globalization. It sure beats looking in the mirror. The end result is that more and more people claim globalization doesn't work. However, is what we have today truly globalization or just one big masquerade?
The spread of industrialization. The shift from manufacturing and agriculture to service industries. Some good examples are Pittsburgh and Cleveland going from steel and other heavy industries to healthcare, number 1 UPMC and the Cleveland Clinic, plus education and research. The transformation from cottage industries to regional, then national markets, and then to global markets.
This illustrates the transformation from cottage industries to regional and then national markets to global markets.
This shows how the Pittsburgh area has transformed from heavy industry, like steel, USX, to service industries. This shows how the Cleveland area has transformed from heavy industry to service industries. The only heavy industry on this list is Ford Motor Company, and the steel industry, such as Republic Steel, is no longer on the list.
This is the employment in the U.S. from 1939 to 2018. We see that the service sector jobs now outnumber the manufacturing jobs by a very large factor of 130 million to 20 million.
These are the employment levels in the U.S. of manufacturing versus farming from 1948 to 2011.
This is the employment in the U.S. by sector from 1948 to 2011. We see the very large growth of the service sector jobs and the decrease in the manufacturing jobs. This is the employment in the U.S. by sector proportionally from 1948 to 2011. We again see the very large growth of the service sector jobs and the decrease in the manufacturing jobs.
Manufacturing was 31% of all jobs in 1950 and was just 9.4% in 2011. The agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting sector was 4.3% of all jobs in 1950 and only 0.9% in 2011.
This shows the dramatic fall in agricultural employment from a high of 32%, or 10 million in 1910 to less than 1% in 2011.
The entire shift in employment from the manual or hands-on type of work in agriculture and manufacturing to the thinking service sector work is in considerable measure due to the Industrial Revolution and subsequent information revelation in which the power of machines, automation, and computers have amplified human abilities to do things.
We now live in the digital world.
What will the future be like? Recommended videos, The Information Age.
Recommended video, Globalization Explained in 1 minute. Recommended video, What is globalization?
Recommended video, What is globalization? Recommended video, What is genetic engineering?
Recommended video, What is a genetically modified food?
Recommended video, What is genetically modified food? BBC What's New?
Recommended video, Information Age.
Recommended video, 5 interesting facts about the information age.
Recommended video, Evolution of Information Age.
Recommended video, Claude Shannon, Father of the Information Age. Recommended video, The Genius of George Boole. RTE1. Recommended video, Difference between analog and digital signals. Recommended video, Computer Science Basics. Binary.
Signals and Systems, Analog and Digital Communication.
Recommended video, Analog and Digital Signals.
Recommended video, Why do computers use ones and zeros? Binary and transistors explained.
Recommended video, What is industrial automation?
Recommended video, What is industrial automation?
Recommended video, What is a digital world?
Recommended video, What is the Internet?
Recommended video, How does the Internet work? ICT number 2.
Recommended video, How the Internet works in 4 minutes. Animation video.
Recommended video, The Internet, Wires, Cables and Wi-Fi.
Recommended video, YouTube navigation.
Table of Contents, the Information Age. Thanks for watching. Please watch some more of my great videos.